Oh, for sure. It's almost a deep.
Take a second right now and just picture the lock screen on your smartphone.
Oh,
Or, maybe your computer's desktop wallpaper.
yeah, I'm guessing I know where this is going.
Right. There is a very, very high probability that you are looking at a picture of nature, like a misty, snow capped mountain peak, a pristine beach, or maybe a lush, perfectly sunlit forest canopy.
Oh, for sure. It's almost the default at this point.
It is. And when you look at it, you probably feel this like momentary sense of peace because it's beautiful, it's highly curated. You get to just admire the majesty of the wild from the absolute unshakable safety of a temperature controlled room, probably with, a coffee in your hand.
Right. Well, it is a highly sanitized, deeply modern way
Yeah.
to interact with the natural world. I mean, our current era of materialism and urbanization,
Mm.
it allows us to extract all the aesthetic and psychological benefits of nature without, assuming any of the biological risk. We engage with the wild entirely on our own terms.
Exactly. And that is exactly where we are starting today. Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're sort of stepping into the roles of cultural analysts to unpack this really surreal, incredibly layered story called The Snow Leopard and the Jungle Queen.
Such a fascinating piece of source material.
It really is. And our mission today is to explore a universe that strips away our modern human materialism entirely. It just replaces our locked doors and grocery stores with this profound, deeply spiritual reverence for nature.
But, and this is a big but, as we're going to see, that spiritual respect comes with its own terrifying set of blind spots.
Right. So the central question we are wrestling with today is this. What actually happens when a society's romanticized philosophical ideal of nature violently collides with its raw, totally indifferent biological reality?
It's a heavy question. And to understand that collision, we really first have to understand the paradigm this story establishes. So the narrative introduces us to the Malayu Jumaitia.
Right. These are the people living in the jungle.
Exactly. They live in the steamy, dense jungles of the lowlands. And they aren't building sprawling cities of concrete to insulate themselves from the elements. They're forest nomads.
Which is such a wild concept compared to how we live.
It is. I mean, they live in these tightly knit, portable wooden huts, and they literally pick up their entire lives and move across the terrain based on the shifting seasons.
Yeah.
They don't force the environment to adapt to them, they adapt to it.
Which, it sounds incredibly harmonious on the surface. They operate on this core philosophical maxim, which is man needed his surrounds just as much as his surrounds needs him.
That's the foundation of their whole society.
Yeah. They fundamentally view humans and nature as absolute equals. Man isn't sitting at the top of a pyramid looking down at the jungle, man. It's just another organism in the web. But, I want to push back on how this actually works in practice.
How so?
Because if you truly believe a tree or like a tiger is your exact equal, how does that actually govern your daily survival? You still have to eat, right?
Well, it governs it through a system of spiritual mechanics. Specifically, it's this fascinating gratitude economy.
The gratitude economy. Okay, explain that a bit.
So, in the culture of the Malayu Jumaitia, animals aren't just biological neighbors. They are divine intermediaries. They genuinely believe that in the absence of humans, animals speak directly to the gods.
Wow.
And more importantly, these animals possess the power to grant their human masters or mistresses their absolute deepest desires.
Right, but it's not like rubbing a magic lamp and making a wish.
No, not at all.
There is a psychological mechanism at play there, because the animals only grant these desires in exchange for the genuine gratitude the humans feel toward them.
Precisely. And think about the social utility of that belief system, right? It forces the human population into a constant state of humility and ecological self-regulation.
But you can't just exploit everything.
Exactly. You cannot overhunt, pollute, or destroy an ecosystem if you genuinely believe the creatures living in it hold the literal keys to your spiritual and material fulfillment. You treat them with an almost paralyzing level of reverence.
And the person who really represents the absolute peak of this philosophy is their leader, Sang Hutan.
Yes, the chief.
Yeah. He's described as sturdy, muscular, and healthy, but his real power is his mind. He is profoundly wise.
And we should probably define wisdom in this context, because it's not about, having a high IQ or reading a lot of books.
Right, it's completely different.
For them, wisdom is the intuitive capacity to perfectly balance the demands of human society with the rigid boundaries of nature. Sang Hutan is the physical embodiment of that equilibrium.
Right.
For instance, he recognizes when the seasonal shift means it's time to relocate the settlement. He doesn't second guess the environment. He immediately calls upon his chief of expeditions, a man named Sang Srilanjit.
And Sang Srilanjit is so fascinating because he isn't using like modern navigation or GPS or anything. He was chosen because he has this deep, almost cosmic attunement.
Oh, his methods are entirely intuitive.
Yeah, he literally reads the stars at night and interprets the landscape during the day. So Sangaben Hutan sends him out into the Belantara, the deep forest, to locate a new dwelling. It just paints this picture of a utopian society functioning in perfect lockstep with the universe.
It really does. It shows us a culture that has seemingly solved the human nature divide through profound intellectual and spiritual respect.
Okay, but this is where I start to see the cracks in their philosophy.
Here we go.
Well, because while the chief is living out this deep, balanced respect, we really need to look at how his daughter interprets these exact same cultural beliefs. Because Princess Dayang Leo Parthia represents a totally different side of this coin.
She certainly represents a highly distorted application of the culture's reverence.
I mean, that is incredibly diplomatic of you to say. I'm just going to say it. She has taken this idea that humans and nature are equals and twisted it into this absurd domestic fantasy.
It is pretty extreme.
She is literally collecting apex predators as household pets. She keeps a giant lizard, a massive snake named Dayang Senona, and a dog that she has officially titled Sang Mulia Enjing, which literally translates to noble dog.
It's so disconnected from reality.
It's like watching those viral videos of modern tourists trying to take selfies with wild bison in a national park. They mistake the absence of immediate aggression for friendship.
That is a perfect parallel. It is the absolute illusion of control. I mean, society removes the day-to-day struggle for survival and replaces it with conceptual reverence. That reverence can really easily rot into a dangerous kind of entitlement.
Entitlement, yes, that's exactly the word.
The princess feels entitled to the friendship of these animals because her culture has labeled them as divine, rather than recognizing them as lethal.
And it gets so much worse. She's sitting there, right, petting her noble dog, and she starts daydreaming out loud about her ultimate wish.
Oh, this part.
Yeah, she sighs and talks about how lovely it would be if the Sang Suria Harimau, the snow leopard, would appear before her, and why. Not so she can admire it from a safe distance. She says, and I quote, "Not only would I adopt it as my pet, but I would seek marital advice from that noble creature."
Seeking relationship advice from a snow leopard.
She wants a wild snow leopard to act as her therapist. This isn't spiritual connection. This is profound intellectual arrogance. She's just totally anthropomorphizing a wild predator, projecting human logic onto an animal that simply does not possess it.
You're hitting on the core vulnerability of their entire society here. Because the culture establishes that snow leopards, specifically those from the distant Grovens of Ventrishen, are universally regarded as noble and awe-inspiring.
Right.
They have turned a biological entity into a cosmic archetype. The princess fundamentally misunderstands the reality of the creature she is worshiping.
Which is the perfect pivot, honestly, because while she is lounging around daydreaming about this noble, majestic therapist, the narrative radically shifts perspectives.
It does, and it's quite a shock.
It rips us out of this philosophical human world and drops us directly into the brutal, mechanical reality of what a snow leopard actually is. And let me tell you, it is not a fairy tale.
No, it is a jarring transition.
Wait.
We are transported to the high hills of Ventrishen. And the environment here is the exact opposite of the steamy, comfortable lowlands the humans inhabit.
It's brutal.
It is a hostile frozen plateau defined by high winds of grand velocity and air temperatures that plummet to minus 85 degrees centigrade.
Minus 85.
Exactly. This isn't a place for philosophy. This is an arena of pure biological endurance.
And out of this unforgiving ice comes our narrative disruptor, Jungular the snow leopard. And I love this detail because it just immediately shatters the human projection of him.
Totally shatters it.
He doesn't leave his mountain on some grand, noble quest to spread wisdom. He leaves because he gets into a massive, violent brawl with the herd's matriarch. He loses, he scowls, and he literally just flees his territory.
Right, and we track his descent down Mount Iris Water in excruciating detail. He moves away from that frozen Grovens plateau, down through lush, temperate forests, and finally crosses into the hot, steamy rainforest slopes of the lowlands.
And we really need to emphasize how his body is reacting to this, how it's failing.
Oh, the physiological breakdown is severe.
Yeah, Jungular is covered in thick fur designed for minus 85 degrees. He is suddenly plunging into a steamy jungle, The heat is literally cooking him alive.
He's desperate.
He feels like he is going to melt and die. His panting becomes frantic. His concentration diminishes entirely. He isn't some majestic king surveying his land. He is a biological engine in absolute crisis. He finally just collapses by a cool mountain pool called Calorancy just to survive.
By tracking his physical deterioration so closely, the story is showing us his fundamental reality. He operates purely on caloric needs, thermal regulation, and instinct.
Right.
As he enters this foreign ecosystem, he isn't bringing nobility. He is a chaotic, unpredictable, variable, hurtling toward a society that thinks it understands how the universe works.
That is exactly what I wanted to focus on.
Yeah.
The humans have built this entire religious framework around the concept of him. To them, he is the ultimate divine symbol. But we, the listener, we know that he is just an exhausted, traumatized animal fleeing a fist fight. So what happens when this exhausted biological reality crashes into their philosophical projection of him?
Well, the collision happens right at the pool of Calorancy. Sang Suria Harimau and his expedition, who remember are out searching for the new settlement location, stumble directly onto the panting Jungular.
And the immediate reaction of the human expedition is deeply unsettling when you know the context of what's about to happen.
It's fascinating, really.
Sang Suria Harimau halts his men. Another expedition member, Sang Abang Rambutan, sees the beast and immediately asks for a theological classification.
Right, he doesn't shout a warning.
No, he asks, is this a Purnama tiger-like, a moon tiger, or is it the Sang Suria Harimau?
And the moment Sang Suria Harimau clasps his hands, confirming it is indeed the Sang Suria Harimau, the noblest creature of the Kakarawala, the universe, the entire expedition's behavior completely shifts.
They drop everything.
They do not raise weapons. They do not back away slowly. They instantly kneel and prostrate themselves in prayer.
We have to unpack the mechanism of what is happening in their brains right here, because the text explicitly tells us what this worship achieves for them. It says their act of prostration was a departure from the mind to the blessed reality that existed in the present.
Right. It is a state of total ego death. They are willingly turning off their analytical brains, suppressing all their human survival instincts, and completely surrendering to the religious awe of the moment.
Wow.
They truly believe that by submitting to this noble creature, they are achieving perfect harmony with nature.
But their blessed reality is a human invention. The actual physical reality is an apex predator that is stressed, overheating, and likely very hungry.
A deadly combination.
I've been thinking about a way to describe this. It's like a group of people standing on a set of train tracks, watching a massive freight train speeding toward them.
Okay, I like this.
And instead of moving, they just close their eyes and start praying out of deep respect for the concept of momentum. Like, you can respect the momentum all you want, but the physics of the train do not care about your respect. It will flatten you.
That analogy perfectly isolates the tragedy here. They confuse their map of the world for the actual territory.
Yes.
Their philosophy dictated that reverence ensures safety, but biological mechanics dictate that an exposed neck is simply an imitation.
And the consequence is instantaneous. While they are fully prostrated, deeply in prayer, the leopard completely ignores their reverence. And I mean, why wouldn't he?
Right, he's an animal.
He leaps directly onto the wise chief Sang Abang Hutan and brutally mauls him to death. The imagery of the chief shrieking in extreme pain while his expedition is literally frozen in prayer is just horrifying.
It is. It's a devastating critique of intellectual arrogance. The very philosophy that made the chief so wise, his deep spiritual belief in the equality of man and nature, is exactly what rendered him physically defenseless.
It's so tragic.
He offered nature his ultimate spiritual surrender, and nature, lacking any capacity for morality or gratitude, simply consumed him.
It is a brutal reminder that the universe does not care about your philosophy. And if you think the story makes its point there and stops, it really twists the knife with this incredibly dark, almost farcical parallel scene happening at the exact same moment back at the human settlement.
Yes, the narrative aggressively cuts back to Princess Dayang Leo Parthia. So remember, her father, the man who genuinely tried to understand the balance of the ecosystem, is bleeding out in the forest.
Right.
Meanwhile, the princess is lounging safely in the camp.
And she is not just lounging, she is heavily intoxicated. She has been smoking periconon flowers,
Which the text describes very specifically.
Yeah, the description of these flowers is super specific. The aroma is likened to marijuana, and it produces a potent, sedative, relaxing effect. The text humorously notes that nobody of science had yet had time to damage its reputation.
That line always gets me.
Right, so she is chemically sedated. on top of being philosophically sedated by her entirely naive worldview.
She is entirely insulated from reality. And while she is in this blissful, ignorant state, her beloved pet anaconda, Dayang Leo, begins to coil its massive body around her.
This is where her domestic fantasy reaches its absolute lethal climax. She is literally being wrapped up by a giant constrictor snake, and instead of panicking, she looks at it and asks, "Oh, Dayang Leo, why do you crawl on your back and hiss? Is it because you are a snake?"
It's unbelievable.
She is asking rhetorical questions to a predator that is actively preparing to digest her.
It is the ultimate manifestation of willful ignorance. Because she refuses to acknowledge the violent mechanics of nature, she literally cannot perceive a legal threat when it is wrapped tightly around her own neck.
No survival instinct at all.
She just assumes the snake is acting moody rather than, acting like a snake.
But then the story delivers its final, just staggering irony. As the snake is coiling, preparing to strike Jungular, appears out of the bush.
Just out of nowhere.
Right. He somehow slipped away from the bloody scene in the forest without anyone noticing. He leaps out, attacks the snake, and inadvertently saves the deeply silly princess.
And the randomness of this event is crucial. The story explicitly points out the staggering irony here. Jungular, having just slaughtered her deeply wise father, is now the savior of the foolish daughter.
And because of this completely chaotic intersection of events, both the traumatized Snow Leopard and the completely naive Princess Leo Parthia actually survive. And the story ends by crowning her the new Queen of the Jungle.
It's such a wild outcome.
Think about the layers of tragedy here. The father, who dedicated his entire life to genuinely respecting the environment, is eaten by it. The daughter, who treats apex predators like cuddly pets and is too intoxicated to notice she is being hunted, is miraculously saved by her father's killer.
It really forces us to confront a very uncomfortable truth about the natural world. We desperately want to believe that nature is a meritocracy.
Oh, absolutely we do.
We want to believe that if we are respectful, wise, and spiritually attuned, the environment will reward us, or at least, spare us. But the story violently dismantles that human desire.
It rips it to shreds.
The forest didn't punish the chief for being bad, and it didn't save the princess for being good. Jungular acted purely on biological instinct and immediate circumstance.
It's an absolute demolition of the idea of fairness. The story sets up this beautiful, idyllic paradigm at the beginning, a culture with no toxic materialism where humans are integrated and spiritually connected to the earth.
Right.
But then it turns around and proves that even the most beautiful philosophy is entirely meaningless to a hungry animal. Nature is just a casino of biological imperatives, and sometimes the dice just roll in favor of the fool.
It demands a complete reevaluation of how we view our relationship with the environment. It agrees that modern materialism blinds us. But it argues that an overly romanticized, purely spiritual view of nature, one that ignores its capacity for unthinking violence, is just as blinding.
And far more immediately fatal.
Exactly.
Which, brings this entire conversation right back to you listening right now. We started off by talking about those beautiful, curated wallpapers on your phone and the safe, sanitized ways we interact with the natural world today. We go on eco tours, we buy organic, we admire the wild from a distance. But when you look at the brutal, random fate of Sangabangutan, you really have to ask yourself a difficult question.
Do we romanticize the untamed world specifically because we are so insulated from it? It is incredibly easy to worship the idea of the wild when you aren't actively fighting for calories within it.
Right.
The Malay Jumaitia sought a blessed spiritual reality in the present moment, but the present reality of a wild predator is always hunger.
Exactly. Our locked doors in grocery stores give us the profound luxury of forgetting nature's raw, indifferent tower. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Lay it on them.
We always talk about respecting nature. And usually when we say that, we mean preserving it, recycling, and striving for a peaceful, harmonious coexistence. But what if true respect for nature doesn't mean aiming for peace?
That's a scary thought.
What if true respect actually means accepting a much more terrifying truth? That in the grand, sweeping mechanics of the universe, our deeply human concepts of fairness, nobility, and wisdom mean absolutely nothing to a hungry snow leopard. Look at your phone wallpaper a little differently today. Thanks for diving deep with us.